Okay, let's see where we are. Okay. Okay, are people able to see anything? Okay, are people able to see anything? Okay, are people able to see anything? Okay, all right. Yeah, so this is the first time I've done this, so audio quality is not going to be exactly right. So let's see. Okay, so let's just do. Okay, are you guys able to see the slides? Um, okay, this is not good. Okay, hopefully you guys are able to see the slides. Partial view only. All right. That's what exactly are we seeing? Okay. Let me see. There's some problem with like the resolution, I guess. Okay. How's that? How about now? Only top left portion is visible. Okay, let's do something. How about now? still only the top left portion. I think this is because of the resolution thing. Okay, so now what? Let's put a capture. Okay. Okay. I can do that. Okay. Okay, is this better? Okay, good. I think that's what we want now. All right. Sorry about this, guys. Like I said, first time trying YouTube live. So expect there will be some problems. All right. So let me repeat a little bit of like what I said previously. We'll just like restart a little bit since I think you guys didn't get any audio. So to run through this sort of like very quickly, I did my undergrad in CEG 2005 to 2009. My advisor was RP ma'am, and my time at CEG was why I basically wanted to do higher studies and grad school. And RPMM instilled that desire to do research in me. So after CEG, I went on to do my master's at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Zoom a little bit. Um, hmm. Okay, this is gonna be hard. Let's see. Hmm. If I zoom in, you will get something cut a little bit. Um, is this okay? Uh, or are you still seeing something? I see. Okay. Better? I wish we had technology where I could hear you guys talking. This is a little bit weird. All right, waiting to see response. All right, good. Okay, so let's continue. So, yeah, so I did my master's in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After my master's, I was undecided what to do. So I basically, my professor said like stay and do a PhD, and I figured that I was having more fun doing research with him than I was at Google. So I basically stayed, and I finished my PhD in 2015. And after that, I went on to do a year of postdoc at VMware Research in California. So that was from 2015 to 2016, and since then I'm in University of Texas at Austin, where I'm an assistant professor. So before I go on, I wanted to say that Alpha CG is doing a great job at this. I believe CG students have a lot of potential to do research. In fact, my first student here at University of Texas at Austin was a CG student, Pandian Raju. He will be a lot senior to you guys, so if I don't know if you know him, but he's been my student. He's been doing great. If his class finishes, he can actually make an appearance. So I think Alpha CG is doing a great job. I believe Saravana, Sendil, and Steny Thomas are responsible for the chat today. So thanks a lot to them. Um, All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is what is grad school, why do masters, why do a PhD, and how to apply to grad school. So basics. So first, what is grad school? So to explain this, I'll have to go through like what you learn at different institutions, right? So consider this circle to be like the sum of all human knowledge, and then yeah, one second. Class is done. Okay, come on. So we had some trouble with with the with the slides and everything. So you want to say hi? There's still people on the line.
Yeah, hi. I'll just introduce myself. I am Pandian. I did my bachelor's in CEG, Computer Science, 2014 passed out. I just started my master's here at UT, and I'm working with Vijay. So specifically, I'm working on key value stores and like storage systems in general. Yeah, so about research, it's good so far. I mean, you get to work on things at the very low level, and people actually get to use what you work on. So, like, I was working in Flipkart for a couple of years before coming to masters, and I got a chance to work with many NoSQL stores, like database systems. And so right now I'm like working at the very low level, like working at the like modifying algorithms which decide how the data is stored. So it's kind of fascinating to see like transfer from the high level of using databases in general to the low level of like how it's being stored. So that's interesting so far.
Okay, so we'll finish off the slides and we'll do a Q&A again, and you guys will have a chance to ask questions directly to Pandian as well. All right, so let me run through this. So in high school, you basically learn the core of what you need to know to survive, right? So basically, you'll be learning about math and physics and chemistry. So it's sort of like the core stuff, right? When you come to do engineering, you specialize in something. So you're not learning general stuff. You're learning engineering and specifically computer science or IT or whatever it is. So you have all round knowledge, but you're started specializing in one direction. So when you when you do a master's, you learn a lot more in that direction. So as Mandian said, like you're learning about databases and NoSQL stores and how information is stored and so on, and you go much deeper than what you would learn in your bachelor's, right? And finally, during a PhD, what you would do is you would focus even more on some one particular topic, and you would do experiments and research and figure out something new that you contribute to human knowledge. So whatever you find in your PhD is something that nobody else in the world knew before. So you are the first person to actually figure this out. So that's kind of exciting. You will never have a problem in your PhD that it's too boring. Usually the problem is that things aren't going as well as you would like. But it is a very exciting thing to be doing, right? So, sort of high level, going to grad school allows you to obtain deep understanding of different subjects via papers and projects. So this is both for masters and PhD, but obviously you do very different things if you're doing a masters versus doing a PhD, right? So let me get into some details. So why would anyone do a master's degree? Okay, so as Pandyan was saying, in a master's degree, you learn the current state of the art. You learn to read and critically analyze papers. You do complex semester-long projects, and then you write reports based on your work. So there's a bit of communication skills involved there. So whatever it is that you want to specialize in, like you are going to learn a lot more, like how the current systems are built, what they're good in, what they're bad at, how do you improve, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what you do in a master's degree. So why should you do a master's degree? If you want to gain in-depth understanding of some subject, like for example, as Pandian said, you want to learn about NoSQL stores, how they write data, and so on. You can do a master's degree. You can also do research during a master's degree, like Pandian is doing with me, and you can figure out whether you want to do a PhD. A master's degree used to be required to get a good job in the US. This is no longer true. A lot of companies are hiring directly from CEG, so you don't really need to do a master's for that reason. But a master's degree is also fun. You have a lot of people who are staying up doing these sort of intense projects through the semester. So there's a lot of like bonding involved, and what you're doing is non-trivial, right? So you do very complicated projects. Think of your final year project. Think of something that's about 10 times harder, and you're going to do it in one semester. So that's sort of like a master's degree project, right? So why should you not do a master's degree? So if your only goal is to get a job in the US, I would say right now it's not required. You can probably get a good job in India, and then you can transfer from that company to the US if that's what you want. Um, so sort of like hidden part about doing a master's degree is that it's very expensive. If you're lucky, you get sponsorship, you get TA or an RA, but in most cases, what would happen is that you end up paying lots of several lakhs of rupees for the time that you do masters. So it's definitely not a cheap way to get an education, right? I mean, you're getting a good education, but it's expensive. So you should keep that in mind. And you should absolutely not do a master's degree if you didn't even like your bachelor's degree, right? You're going to be learning a lot of stuff. The load is very high. And if you're like, oh, let me just get a master's degree and then I'll get a nice job in the US, that's really not going to work. If you come here to do a master's degree and then you totally flop in the master's degree, nobody's going to give you a job. So that's something to keep in mind. Like I said, it's very expensive, so you want to make sure that you can afford it. So that's sort of like the big constraint for a master's degree. And if you want to do anything in India, right, like if you want to do startups, etc., it's better that you are in India. So coming here, getting a master's degree and going back to do a startup doesn't really make sense. So these are reasons why not to do a master's degree, right? So let's go look at a PhD briefly. So what is a PhD? I mean, a lot of people have this mythical notion that a PhD is just like an extension of your master's where you take more courses. So it's totally not the case, right? A PhD is a job. You get paid a salary. It's very little compared to what you can make when you get a full-time job, but you do get paid something. So your living costs, etc., are covered. And your job is to produce new research. So you're supposed to build interesting systems and write papers and push the state of the art. So that is what you do, right? And the thumb rule is that if you do 3 significant projects, 3 publications, you get a PhD. And if you're doing this together along with the master's degree, it takes 5 to 7 years. If you just do a PhD, it takes about 4 years. Um, Typically, like if you start off like doing research immediately when you start in your master's degree, your time to PhD will be shorter because you're already doing the importance of the research pretty early on. So why would someone ever do a PhD, right? And the answer is it's kind of complicated, but the answer is that you want to trade money for freedom. So what do I mean by that? So you have to think about like what you want from your life. And when you're 21, 22, right? So if you want to like quickly ramp up and do something big, you want to do 3 things. So you want to make a name for yourself. So something where you are known for that, right? You want to fail because like if you're trying risky things, you will fail. So you want to fail in a safe environment, and you want to get to the higher level jobs faster, right? So you don't want to be in a situation where you have to get to an interesting job in your company. You need to have like 6 promotions, which takes 10 years, and after that you can actually design something. So you want to fast track yourself, and a PhD will let you do that. Okay. So here's a graph of like different kinds of jobs, and how they fall on this money and freedom axis. So on top you have financial jobs. So if you go to work for Wall Street, Morgan Stanley, financial companies, right? You will make a ton of money, right? But you will have zero freedom. You can't really implement whatever you want. You can't even try new things. You're basically their IT support, so you do what they tell you to do, and you have very little freedom, but you have a lot of money. So normal software development is somewhere in between. So you have some chance of doing whatever it is that you want, but you get paid significantly less money. And in a PhD, you get the lowest amount of money, but you have full freedom. And why is this important? Why is freedom so important, right? So when you start a PhD at age 21 or 22, you are paid to initiate new ideas, to collaborate with people, to execute on your ideas, to build systems, and then sell your own ideas in the form of a research paper or a presentation. There is no other job in the world which will allow you to do this. So if you, for example, if you go work for Microsoft, right, then there will be some upper level management which will decide what products to work on. Your team lead will tell you this is the feature you have to do, and then you're supposed to do that. Once you've done it, somebody else will take over sales and marketing. So in the whole picture, you're learning a very, very small part, right? Whereas in a PhD, that's not really the case. It's all you. That's why there's stress, but that's why there's also a learning. So typically, this same reason is why people go and do startups, right? Because in a startup, it's similar to a PhD. You have to do all of these things yourself. Thereby, you learn a lot. Okay. So the difference between a startup and a PhD is that you can fail in a safe environment. So if you go join a startup and you figure out you have some risky idea and it doesn't work, then you eat up all your money and then you go bankrupt. Okay, so it's not like a safe environment. Whereas in a PhD, you fail a lot. Like Pandian and I submitted a paper and then we got rejected, but you learn from that. So papers getting rejected is extremely common. Your ideas getting bashed is extremely common. Your talks getting trashed is extremely common. But the thing is, like, none of this, it doesn't. It's nothing is permanent. Like you learn from all of these things. You resubmit to the next conference, and you're fine. So it allows you to try risky ideas and fail in a safe manner, and then sort of like improve. And finally, it allows you to obtain high level jobs faster. So if you go look at Google, right? So I don't know if you guys know who Jeff Dean is, but all the principal architects and high level directors, they all have PhDs. Because to have this high level vision of like where the product is going and all the technical details required in it, you don't need a PhD, but I would say a PhD makes this much easier. So at a lot of companies, if you want to eventually get to principal engineer or software architect, having a PhD is really helpful, right? Now there are some people who will say that you can learn all of this on the job, and that is true. You definitely can, but to do that, you need to be very, very exceptional because that's not the main point of your job. So every day you will have bug fixes to do, features to develop, etc. And along the way, maybe you can develop all these skills, but that's not the focus of your job. Whereas in a PhD, it really is the focus. That this is what you're getting paid to do. Okay. So why would you not do a PhD? So the top reason I like to quote is for the prestige, right? So people say, oh wow, people will call you a doctor, you're going to be Dr. Vijay. So, and the sort of counterpoint to this is, when you get a PhD and you go work at some company or in university, everybody will have PhDs, right? All of my colleagues have PhDs. If you go to Google, all of your colleagues will have PhDs. So it doesn't even matter. Like, it's sort of like a basic criteria. Nobody's going to call you doctor, right? And if you're going to ask people to call you doctor, it means you're a jerk. So this is not a good reason to do a PhD. Another sort of like a little bit more insidious reason to do a PhD is I like learning new things. I want to learn all there is to learn about machine learning, right? So if you want to do that, you should do a master's degree. Learning about something and doing research are very, very different things. Doing research involves a lot of like coding, trying out new ideas, figuring out why this thing is not performing as well as we would like. It's very different from learning new ideas, right? There's a lot of like non-glamorous work involved in doing research that is not involved in learning. So if you just like learning, you should do a master's, not a PhD. And again, a PhD is not cheap. So of course you're getting a stipend, so you're not paying the school money. But there is a problem that if you went out to industry and got a job, you would be making a ton of money. So in the US, they say the cost of a PhD is a house. You could buy a house with all the money that you're giving up by doing a PhD. The counterpoint to that is that if you have a career over like 40 years, that money doesn't matter. At the end of your life, it does not matter whether you are making $30.5 million or $30 million, right? In the long run, it doesn't matter, but initially it will matter. So if you have financial consideration, so if you want to support your family, you're the main breadwinner or something, then yes, that is a consideration and you should keep that in mind when deciding, right? Other point about the PhD is that a lot of the work you have to do is alone because the PhD is conferred on you. You are the person becoming doctor, ergo you have to do the work. So if you don't like working alone, you like doing all your work in teams, the PhD may not be a good thing for you. You will collaborate in a PhD, but there's work that you need to do alone. Otherwise, you'll never learn. So that's another something. And the main reason of stress in a PhD is that it's not defined. So in a master's degree, you have to do 8 courses. You have to get certain grade in all of them, and you finish and you get a degree. There's nobody like that telling you in a PhD what exactly you have to do. You have to do research, but then how do you do research? How do you spend your time? So if you're a person who likes, like set timetable, this is what I'm doing every hour of my day, and if you don't like not knowing what to do, PhD is not for you. The other flip side of this is that once you do the PhD, you will not be afraid of uncertainty. So I talk to a lot of friends in industry where they have a project where it's all very vague and uncertain, and they're very scared because like nobody knows really what to do. If you finish a PhD, you will know what to do. And typically, as you move up the levels in a company, your job description is going to be undefined, right? If you're a director of some software group, nobody's going to tell you this is the product you have to develop. You have to figure all of these things out on your own. So PhD helps you do all of that. And there are some myths about a PhD which are very damaging, I think. And the myth is that you have to be super smart to do a PhD, which is absolutely wrong. So I've met a lot of people who think that they can't do a PhD for this reason, okay, and it's totally not true. What you really need to succeed in a PhD or determination, if you hit a rough spot, you should continue. So you should have determination. You need good communication skills. So if I'm asking you to develop a system and you hit a snag, you should be able to clearly tell me what is exactly going on. Okay, so that's when I can help you. So if your communication skills are really poor, then you will suffer. But that's really all you need. You don't need to be a genius to do a PhD. So all you need to do is like be you have some common sense, have determination, not give up, and have good communication skills. All right. So finally, I'm going to talk about how you apply to grad school. Um, so applying to masters or a PhD requires planning beforehand. It's not something where you can decide today I want to apply and then apply tomorrow, right? So there's actually some work involved in this. So if you decide last minute, it usually does not work out very well. So when you apply for either of these things, this is what you'll need. They'll ask for your CGPA, which means your transcripts. They will ask for letters of recommendation, your GRE score, your TOEFL score, and your research. Now, if you're first years, you never have heard any of these things. So GRE is you can think of it as a test of math and verbal skills, how good you are at English and how good you are at math. And then TOEFL is sort of like English speaking and writing ability. How well do you speak English? If you come to the US, can you speak fluently with your colleagues and so on? Okay. Now, these are sort of like the bigger components, and for masters and a PhD, different things matter. So for a master's degree, you need to have a decent CGPA. Okay, so every time I say this, there will be someone in the audience who will be like, but I've heard of this person so and so who had like 7.2 CGPA and is now at this really great school. So there are exceptions, okay, but this is not the norm. If you have like a poor CGPA, the committee will usually disregard it unless somebody they know writes a very strong recommendation letter saying this guy is really good, he's as good as this other guy Y who you admitted last year, and that professor needs to be very convincing. Okay, so if you want to eventually go for higher studies, it's good to have a decent CGPA, something 8 or 9 plus, right? For the top schools, you really need more than 9. For slightly better, I mean, like decent schools, you need something above 8. So if you have less than 8, it's pretty hard. The letters of recommendation are extremely important, and this is something that is sadly very misused in India, right? I mean, you write your own recommendation letters in many cases, but you want strong letters, okay? And if you want the way you get strong letters is by doing projects with different professors. So if you don't know anybody in CEG who you can ask a letter from, that's a bad sign. So you should have done at least like some reasonably intensive projects with 3 professors or done very well in 3 classes. You should get letters from them. The more projects you do, the better they can talk about you. And GRE scores are important, right? So it's not that they aren't important, but they are not the deciding factor. So if you have a 7.2 CGPA but you have a perfect score on your GRE, you're still not going to get in. On the other hand, if you have a 9.9 CGPA and you have a very poor GRE, you're also not going to get in. So there needs to be some balance there. So don't disregard the GRE. Now, applying for a PhD is very different from applying for a master's. Do not apply for a PhD before you've done some kind of research with someone. Okay, so intern with professors in IIT Madras, in IIC Bangalore, and other IITs, do some research over some summer and then apply. it makes your application much stronger, and it allows you to actually get a feel for what research is and what you can do. Okay. So when you're applying for a PhD, if you have three strong letters from, let's say, three IIT professors saying you're awesome, that's really it. You don't really need a good CGPA to do a PhD. Okay. But then, of course, you should have done really good research and potentially got published somewhere. All right. So finally, when you're selecting schools, you should look at things like US News rankings. This is a ranking of like different schools in the US. You talk to professors, RP ma'am, others about good universities. You see where your seniors have gone. You use EduLux and other forums to basically select your universities. My advice is that you pick 10 universities, three of which should be sort of like what I call the dream category, where you have a very little chance of getting in, but if you get in, that's amazing. Uh, three or four universities where you have a solid chance, and then three universities where if everything goes wrong, you can go to the universities, but ideally you do not want to go there. I call them safe universities. There are people who apply to all 10 safe universities. That is the wrong way to go, because graduate admissions are very random. It also depends upon who else is applying at the same time to the same school. So you may be excellent, but there may be the gold medalists from all 4 previous years of CEG who are applying at the same time, which means you won't get in. So have a mix of like dream, medium, and safe universities. Okay. All right. So in conclusion, this is a great time to be thinking about graduate school. Research is a lot of fun. I'll let Patil talk a little bit more about it later. But try research in undergrad, right? The sort of like main regret I have about CEG is that like there's very little research that goes on. So don't do research at CEG. Go outside, go to IISc, IIT somewhere, and do some research. Okay, give it a try to before you do graduate. And don't be in a hurry to get a job. You're all CG students. You are excellent students. You will definitely do well. So there's no hurry to get a job. You will definitely get a good job finally. Okay. So if you go look at my website, I have pages for prospective students. Like if you want to work with me, what are the things that I provide, like internships, travel, etc. And what do I look for when I'm hiring students? So sort of like the main thing I look for at this point is that you should be able to communicate well, and you should have excellent coding skills. Okay, so if I give you a code base, you should be able to make some progress on it by like a week. If you can't do that, then it's going to be a problem. Okay, but I am available on email and Twitter. So apart from this chat, please do send me questions, and I'd be happy to answer. So now I'll open it up to you can ask questions both to me and to Pandian, and we will respond. All right, I'm hoping there's still people listening. We'll ask questions. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right. So we have our first question. If I'm from Vishwanath, if I'm sure that I want a PhD, should I apply directly for integrated PhD programs? Yes. Well, yes and no. So depends. Like, how do you know you want a PhD? So if you've done some research and you like it, yes, sure, you should definitely apply for PhDs directly. If you've never done research and you have undergrad from CEG, you might get into PhD programs if you sort of like have like 9.5 CGPA. Otherwise, it's pretty hard. So I would advocate doing research before applying for a PhD. Okay. Next question from Arun Prasad. There is a recent notion that studying and working in the US will be a little difficult due to recent administrative changes. Is this true? No, I don't think it affects us directly, or so far hasn't affected us directly. So here's what happens. So when you finish your master's degree, you will have 3 years in which you can work on the student visa. It's called the F1 visa, and you have 3 years to work on it. Before your 3 years are done, you have to apply for something called the H1B visa, and then once you get the H1B, you're set for 6 years. Okay, so So far, they have been trying to make the H1B getting the H1B visa a little bit harder. But if you're in computer science and if you're going to work at, let's say, Amazon or Google or whatever, it's really not going to affect you. If you're in programs like MIS, for example, then it's going to be a little more difficult because the salary you get after your masters will affect whether you can get the H1B visa or not. But right now, I'd say there's no problem, and like people like Facebook and Amazon and Google, they want to keep the current status, so they're battling hard for that. So right now, I'd say there's no concern. At least for people coming in like next fall, let's say 2018, for them there's no problem. Eventually, we'll have to see. All right, Aditya asks, does having work experience boost your profile as compared to applying after UG directly? I'll let Pandian answer this a little bit and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So I think he's specifically asking about the admits.
Hmm.
So I think as far as the admits are concerned, I don't think it plays a big role. The decision to give an admit doesn't depend much on the work experience. But once you come here, like during the career fair, you'll be applying to different companies, and if you have work experience, then like you'll get called from many companies. That is a difference, but still, I would say it doesn't matter a lot because like I have seen many people without local experience who got an internship pretty earlier, so that shouldn't be a blocker.
Yeah, I agree with Pandian. So, um, most work experience doesn't matter, right? So, for example, if you worked for a year at Microsoft Research, yes, that's going to boost your profile. But if you're going to work at Cognizant or Tata or wherever, that's pretty much the same. In fact, I would say if you do this wrong, having work experience kills your profile because your professors sort of like forget about you unless you're like a star student, and then like you don't get as good letters. Uh, Typically, I think the best time to apply is basically right after undergrad for a master's. For a PhD, it's after getting some research experience. All right. So then, Ishani222 asks, if I plan to do research internship after graduating and then applying for masters, will it boost my chances for getting a good admit? Yes, that is true. Any research that you do and you do get a good letter from the professor will increase your chances. But I mean, for a master's, it's not required. So a lot of people have this misconception that you need to do research for a master's. A master's is basically about like how well you did in undergrad. So if you have good grades, if you get good letters, that's basically it. So if you do research and then like you get a good letter, that's fine. But the research part is kind of optional. All right. So then Shruti asks, suggest a few professors in CEG working under whom will be of great help and whose letter of recommendation will help get in. Um, I'll let Pandian jump in first.
Uh, okay, so I would say like first thing is like pick professors based on your area of interest, not just based on their reputation. That is the first thing. Apart from that, I think there are many good professors in CEG who have great reputation here. Like we have RP ma'am, we have TV Gita ma'am, we have Arul Suramani sir, Rajeshwari ma'am, and then so on. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, it, look at where the students have previously gone, right? So I think RP ma'am has a huge history of placing students in the US. Shashwati Mukherjee ma'am has a lot of history. Arul Siro sir, and others. So sort of like a good heuristic is if they're older and they're actively doing good teaching, their students will be in good places and you should work under them. Okay, the younger professors, so from what I've heard, don't do that as well. So maybe avoid them. All right. Does masters from US and other countries have some difference? It does. So typically, it depends on where you want to work. So obviously, if you want to work in Germany, go do a master's in Germany. But if you want to work in the US, if you do a master's from Germany, companies are not going to look at you that much, right? It's going to be hard to apply to the US from the masters. So it depends on like finally where you want to end up on. And I think there are good schools in Europe, like ETH Zurich, for example, in Switzerland. That's also pretty good. So if you can do a master's there, that's fine. I think the one big difference is that in certain German schools, the master's is free. Basically, you can do a master's for no cost. So I think that's a good difference. Then Adarsh asks, regarding letters of recommendation, does the designation of the faculty member matter? Um, Not so much the designation as the reputation, right? So even if RP ma'am retires, her letter from her is going to be super valuable, right? It doesn't. So if you get letters from professors who are well known, whose students are working here, that's generally better, and perhaps they will be full professors. But just being a full professor does not guarantee that their letter will be very useful. So it's not about that. It's about the reputation and how well they do research. Like RP ma'am is still active in research, right? So that's a very good sign. So you want to pick professors like that.
And just to add to that, I would say that getting a mediocre recommendation from a strong professor is actually not that better than getting a strong recommendation from a mediocre professor.
Yes.
So it all depends on how strong the letter is.
Yeah. So I was on the committee this year, right? So we look at the letters for each student, and then we very little look at like who's writing it, right? So as long as there's some, they're a professor from somewhere, we look very little at who's writing it. What we look at is like what does the letter say. So generic letters like oh, this person took my class, they got an A, is not very useful. A great letter would be something like this. I worked with X in my class. He was my student. He did an excellent project on Y. The project had really challenging bits like this and this. He did a great job. I think he's a great student. I think he's among the top students I've seen in the last 5 years. He's equivalent to student X at University Y or student Z at University A, right? So if you if you get a comparison like that, like this student is as good as this other student already doing masters in the US, that's a very very strong recommendation. So things like this is a very nice person, he's very hardworking. All of that is like nobody cares. We want to know how good you are, like how well you will do in courses. So things like top 5 students in the last year or a top student in the last 5 years, as good as this other student. That's really what you want, right? So you should work with the letter writers to do that. So you shouldn't like generic like he's a very nice guy letter will not get you anywhere. Okay. So being from a fair decent undergrad college, but not from a great college like IIT or BITS, will it be difficult to get into dream universities for MS or PhD? Okay. This is so in Wisconsin Madison there are more students from CEG every year than from IIT or BITS. Okay. So it totally depends upon the students who go there, how well a job they do. I would say at this point, at many universities, CEG is fairly well known. There is a problem because it's called Anna University, but it's kind of well known, and there have been great graduates from CEG. So if you go to like someplace like Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin has this huge pipeline every year. Like there are like so many people coming to Wisconsin. I was there for 6 years at Wisconsin. We used to conduct like a CEG dinner every year. The first year we did that, there were I think 6 people. The year I left, there were 22 people at that dinner. So a lot of people are coming to Wisconsin, and as your university gets established there, it doesn't matter whether you're from IIT or BITS. So it's all about like whether you can trust that university. So I would say it's not a problem at all, especially from CEG. Okay, so we have Aditya asking, financial costs aside, is there any real advantage in a 1 year MS over a traditional 2 year program? What would you recommend? So typically 1 year MS programs are ways for the university to make money. You learn nothing in a 1 year master's program. You take I think 4 courses. None of the bigger universities will provide a 1 year master's program. It's usually 2 years or 1.5 years. So you're going to pay a lot of money, and coming here is a hardship. You want to make sure you get some value out of it. So I would recommend not doing a 1 year master's. Okay, how to select the professor for PhD? How did you choose the field you want to get a PhD in? From Vishwanath. Okay, so a lot of different ways. So here's my story. When I went to Wisconsin, I wanted to do a PhD in architecture because I worked with RP ma'am on architecture. When I went there, I started working with a different professor. He did operating systems research. I really liked that and sort of like started doing things. So you have to try different things to figure out like what it is that you like. regarding how to select professor, like select a professor who you work well with. So it's not important that your professor is like some superstar. It's more important that he has a lot of time for you, like you do active projects, that you do publish a lot, and he helps you in your career. So having a superstar professor who's never there, who's always giving keynotes, whatever elsewhere, is not useful, right? So you should try a lot of things to figure out your field. You should look at who's doing good research in that field to figure out your professor. So that's what I would recommend. Um, any additional thoughts on that from Pandian?
Um, no, actually nothing.
Okay.
I think it might be sometimes better to like choose young professors. I mean, I believe they will be more active, like how Vijay is right now. I would say he's more active than myself. So yeah, so that is definitely thing. So that is kind of a trade-off between a young professor as well as an experienced professor. I mean, in a way, like both are good. So it's up to you to choose one.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, this only matters for a PhD. For a master's, you're not really selecting anybody. You know, like you apply to the university, you come here, you do courses, and then you're done, right? For a PhD, your professor matters a whole deal, so you want to make sure that there is a good fit. Right? Okay, how to overcome financial constraints to get a higher education in foreign universities? Sadly, for a master's, there's not really a lot you can do. So what happens is a lot of students come here and they figure out ways to get funding. So they do teaching assistantships, where they help teach classes like correcting papers and so on, or they get what is called a project assistantship. So, for example, they do MATLAB work in some other department, so things like that. If you can also get a research assistantship, but sometimes those are reserved for PhD students. So I would say there's very little chance that if you do a master's degree, that you end up paying nothing. You will have to be prepared to pay at least like a year's tuition in for a master's degree. So that's kind of like a big deal. But sadly there's very little ways to get around that. If you're going to do a PhD, there's you don't have to pay anything. They will pay you a stipend, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're doing a PhD, the things you have to worry about is like, can I get a good university? Do I work with a good professor? Can I publish and so on, right? So yeah, so for a master's, very sadly, there's very little that can be done. On the flip side, though, after you finish your master's, if you do it at a good place, you will get a job making lots and lots of money. So you will be able to pay back your education loan for your master's very easily, like in 3 or 4 years, even sooner if you save more. So I would say don't worry about it. Like if you can come up with like the money for like 1 year's tuition, you should take a loan or something. You should come here, do a master's, and then you will be able to pay it off very easily. And then you will continue to earn at a very high rate. So uh, in the long run, it's good for you. Okay. All right. Um, other questions? Okay. All right. So we will be signing off. Once again, thank you for Alpha CG for setting this up. Saravana Sendil and Steny Thomas for reaching out and doing this. So again, I highly recommend that students in CEG do research internships. So we have one more question. Do research internship opportunities, to undergrad students get research internship opportunities in MSR? Yes, they do. Every summer, MSR takes a ton of interns. You have to be very strong in your fundamentals to get through, but they do take a ton of interns. And doing an internship in MSR is a very good way to get a good letter for a master's or a PhD application. So I highly recommend that you go intern at MSR, at HP Labs, Bell Labs, etc. Okay. All right. So again, thank you guys, and send us your questions.
Yeah, thank you guys, and good luck.
Yeah, good luck. I hope a lot of people apply and come to UT Austin. All right. See you guys.